Here we go. So I'm going to be talking about Cyprus, and as I'm sure you know, Naturetrek lead a number of Cyprus trips, five in all. A go slow in an island of Cyprus in March, and then a Cyprus at Christmas. There's a spring in northern Cyprus, which dovetails pretty well in with the end of the island of Cyprus trip. And then there's a wonderfully titled The Autumn Flowers of Aphrodite's Isle. Now, I've been doing these Cyprus trips, the go slow in the island of Cyprus and the Christmas Cyprus trips for some years now. And they're absolutely wonderful. If you are working with Naturetrek, sometimes you can snaffle a trip and hang on to it with grim death. And I do that for my go slow and island Cyprus ones for sure, because they're in March. And come February, which can be anybody who has a birthday in February, you're really looking forward to the spring, and you get an accelerated spring when you come to Cyprus. There's warmth, there's sun, there's birds, there's fun, and there's gaiety. It's all very good fun. It'll be better fun if my PowerPoint works. And there we go. That's the end of that one. It doesn't seem to be operating. Jolly good. Well, there we are. I was so full of optimism that this was going to operate, and you were going to see a wonderful picture. Blimey. Well, I don't know. I'm hoping that you can see this. I can now.
Yeah, we're on to the map, Andy. Now, yeah.
Thank God. Okay. Right. I hope you're not doing anything until midnight, people. Oh, we've moved. Now we've moved backwards and forwards. It's I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've given a talk in the old days when you had slides, and you were walking confidently up to the podium and then you tripped and fell over and all the slides went over the floor. This is sort of an equivalent. This is the go slow trip to Cyprus. We fly into Paphos, as you can see, and then the whole area takes place just on this western part of Cyprus. We never travel very far. We have two places, two hotels to stay in, Paphos and up at the top there near the Baths of Aphrodite. They're not very far between them. The longest trip we do is down to the Akrotiri Salt Lake, and that is a great trip. When we arrive, we are met by our bus, and it's an excellent bus because unlike so many buses, it's got clear windows, and so you can see out of them, and you can actually move the windows back and take photographs, and that is very helpful. The driver who comes with us, a chap called Doros, is fantastic. He's done all of my Cyprus trips. He almost instinctively knows when to stop and when to go around a corner carefully. And also he manages to get through the tiny little villages with a bus full of people, which I would be slightly worried about cycling through. And their center screen is the wonderful Yanis. Yanis is the guy who I have led the trip with since I started. He is a botanist, but he is more than a botanist. He is a polymath. He's a polyglot as well. But he doesn't just do botany and plants. You can see how excited he gets when he's got a handful of green herbage in his hands. But he does geology, and he knows the history of the island. He knows just about everything there is to know about Cyprus, and he's an absolute delight to work with. Now, I'm sort of half hoping that by now there might be a bunch of delicious pumpkin pies in front of you. I must admit I was salivating a little bit at Simon's description of the food there, but to his haute cuisine, I give the humble bakery pastries. Absolutely wonderful. That you can't really go wrong with those. But on the go slow trips in particular, we also aim to get into a taverna or two, and the food there is simple, honest food, but it is absolutely excellent. And Yanis tells me that the sort of default diet for people in Cyprus is basically vegan. There certainly is an enormous amount of incredibly good vegan, vegetarian food. it's all very delicious. So we pick up from the airport, we dash towards the hotel. It's a very short distance. The flight is early in the morning from Gatwick, so we've got a bit of an afternoon to spend doing some birding, and we find these laughing doves on the beach on our way. Now, when I first started doing these trips, laughing doves were a rarity. They were the sort of bird that you sought out, and if you saw them, you leapt up and down and did a high five. Now, laughing doves have expanded in the way doves do, really quite remarkably. And now you see them all over the place. You see them, they're very sagacious birds. You see them outside all of the bakeries eating the crumbs that people have left on the way. You get spur-winged plovers. No trip, no nature trek, no birding trip is really complete unless it has visited a sewage farm. And just next to the beach is a rather elegant little sewage farm with a whole variety of bits and pieces in it, but in particular some very, very smart looking spur-winged plovers. They really are beautiful birds. So from there, we zip to our hotel. This is a view from our hotel. It is in Old Paphos. And if you look to the back of the screen, you will see the lighthouse, which is there. And that marks the site of the archaeological site that I'll be talking about in a few minutes' time. It's a nice little hotel. It is family run. It is run by two brothers. With luck, you will see one of the brothers clutching his grandchildren there. It is incredibly friendly, and they do absolutely gorgeous breakfasts there. We eat elsewhere, as I'll mention in a second, but the breakfasts have got homemade jams and yogurts and fruits and things like this. And also the window overlooks all of that marvelous view, so you can do a little bit of birding. We often see peregrines whilst we're having our breakfast. I'll try and steal a seat overlooking the window. Then in the evening, we walk, it's about 10 minutes or so walk to the local taverna, and George there produces very, very classic, typical Cypriot food. There you can see my modest portion of something or other. I'm not quite sure exactly what I was eating then, and my equally modest portion of Kio beer. Yanis, sitting opposite me, has obviously noticed that somebody else has got a bit more food on their plate. In the morning, we go to the archaeological site just close to the hotel, as I mentioned, and this is an absolutely fantastic place. There are a couple of sites: the Tomb of the Kings, which aren't really kings; it's the Tomb of the Aristocrats, to be accurate, but also the Paphos Archaeological Park, which has got these amazing mosaics. These are 1,800 years old. They are absolutely incredible, and you can spend as long as you like looking at these, or you can join the rest of us and wander outside into this fantastic Greek style habitat with asphodels and things. And of course, there's an awful lot to see here. It's a very, very well-known site, I know, but I like to spend my time when I'm there just moving around the small bushes, because you know how exciting it is when you're on the hunt for migrants. So we're in March, either early, mid, late March, and you never know what's going to turn up. I mean, almost quite literally, you never know what's going to turn up. So 1 minute a bush will be empty, the next minute there'll be a Rupel's warbler looking at you with that magnificent white eye stripe. 1 minute there's nothing there at all, and then there's a bunting or a pair of buntings or 3 or 4 buntings that have suddenly popped out of seemingly nowhere in order to say hello. The place can be absolutely hooching with pipits and with wagtails. There's an awful lot of meadow pipits to sift through, but nearly always we find one of these very, very handsome red-throated pipits, absolutely glorious to see. And sometimes they can almost be abundant. Equally, probably more abundant are the number of wagtails that appear in all sorts of, not shapes, but all sorts of colours of head, black-headed and grey-headed and blue-headed, you name it. They are like little jewels flitting around in this area of the archaeological site. Loads of plants as well. That Yanis, who has written the book, literally written the book on the plants of Cyprus, hunts around for, that we all hunt around for, but in the park in particular, so many parts of Cyprus, you get these wonderful cyclamens that are growing up the cracks or on the edges. They're just fantastic things to see. We go the next day is our longest drive. It's only an hour's drive, so it's not too long. And we go to the Akrotiri Peninsula. En route, Yanis entertains us with his encyclopedic knowledge of everything Cypriot, in particular the geology, which is a really fascinating geology. People visit Cyprus just for the geology. So we hear about that, and we hear about some of the history before we get there. And then we have a hunt around this magnificent place. So there was an area which I said, well, sometimes we don't see very much here, but we'll give it a go. And we walked up there and we found kingfisher and Chetty's warbler, spotted crake, blue-throat, marsh harrier, and in the background there were various other warblers tweeting away. What do I know about what's going to be good and what's going to be bad? But this site sometimes can absolutely come up trumps. Elsewhere, as we drive around the peninsula, we see these wonderful flamingos. They're fairly common there. We can get quite close to them. We can even do some reasonable photography. That was one of my shots. You can tell that because it's slightly out of kilter. I've been very fortunate in a number of people from the last few trips who have lent me their slides. If the slide is good and crisp and sharp and well composed, then it's been from Michael Piercy or John Hale or Jim Sutherland or Philip Hamner or Tim or Marigold or somebody. This is a glossy ibis that we see striding around in the marsh. Again, you're never quite sure what might be in this marvelous, magnificent habitat. We see just little egrets and cattle egrets and the herons too. And this purple heron, we quite often get extremely good views. And this one was remarkably tame and sat in the reed bed and enabled people to get reasonably close, seemingly unconcerned. We see bitterns too, and here is a bittern doing a sort of an impression of E.T. in a way, flying high away from the marsh. We've had some fantastic views of them. Wherever we go, there's small pools which can have anything. This one time we drove and stopped, and there were 20 gull-billed terns dipping and diving and catching insects. We went back a little while ago, they'd gone, but other things had arrived. It is one of these sites where you never really know what's going to happen. A huge fall of yellow wagtails, a massive number of waders. And there are plants there too. We stopped for lunch and Yanis went off looking for orchids and came back very excitedly. He'd found this a group, I'm not quite sure what the collective noun for orchids is, a multitude perhaps. There certainly were a multitude of Ophrys cocci, which is an endemic, and they were extremely impressive. I mean, they really were. They were big, there were lots of them, they were in very good nick. When we got back to the bus, we had to sort of lie Yanis down. He was so excited, but they were fantastic to see. So now we've moved away, or are moving away from Paphos. We're heading very, very, very gently north. We're going to go to our next hotel. And en route, of course, we stop off at various different places. There's a site near a dam where we have been lucky with this, the Cyprus warbler. Not always lucky, but the last time I was there, we had some good, if brief, views. They're difficult birds to see, but they can pop up in various different places. We head to a place called the Episcopi Center, which is really interesting and has got lots of exhibits as well as good gardens and interesting things for birds, and it's high up and it sits near a massive limestone rock, a reef limestone, African reef limestone, which is in itself a very interesting geological formation. And on that, there normally is a peregrine. We hope there's a peregrine. We always look for the peregrine. We normally find the peregrine, and it's the Mediterranean race, so it looks that little bit darker. Also around and about the place, a genuine endemic, Cyprus scops owl. We've been pretty fortunate in being able to find that, as all of us know who've been hunting owls. They can be tricky when they are roosting, but sometimes we get the information and we're able to find the owls. We go after that to a little valley for a very special bird, Finch's wheatear. I'm sure a number of you have heard of it. It's a wheatear that winters in Cyprus. It's very, very difficult to get to the place where it goes for the spring and summer, so it's an excellent opportunity to see it. It's best, to be honest, during the Christmas trip because it's there for the winter, but we've quite often seen it in the beginning, in the go slow trip, which is the earlier of the two trips in March, when it's lurking around. It depends a little bit on what the weather is like. If the winter has been cool, the bird will hang around a bit longer, and hopefully we can catch up with them. They are interestingly cautious. They very rarely let you get more than about 200 meters away. Other than that, they're fine. But if the Finch's wheatears have gone, then the chances are that the Cyprus wheatear will be around, and we normally catch up with these with their really remarkable and very curious buzzy song quite often. And we drop into a little wetland area where we've been lucky with all sorts of things: red-rumped swallows, great spotted cuckoos, and this citrine wagtail. And we go, finally, before we hit our hotel, we go to a little woodland pear forest where we can find various orchids, and we have found this chameleon. The next day, dawn's bright and sunny, nearly always does, and we are now in our new hotel. And our hotel is in a most magnificent setting overlooking the Mediterranean. It is absolutely gorgeous. Lovely buffet meals and lovely buffet breakfast as well. And what we tend to do, because it's in a rural area, is we have an early morning potter about for those who would like to have an early morning potter about. And we find various orchids, we find various field gladioli, and we regularly hear and generally manage to see the black francolin. It's got a very distinctive call, as I'm sure you know, and you can hear it. We can hear it while we're having breakfast, but we can go out and look for it. And it's like one of these very strange birds you get, and like water rails can be like this, and corncrakes too. Very, very secretive, can't see them, and then all of a sudden they get a rush of showing off disease, and they hop onto the top of a rock or something like this, and that's what we hope that they do. So once we have had our breakfast, a lovely buffet breakfast with these homemade marmalades and yogurts and various other things like this, we head off. It doesn't take us very long before we get hungry again, and we stop at this nice picnic site, which is by an old Turkish village. Very interesting and very good for a whole range of different small birds, little migrants and rock thrushes and you name it. And we end up going to a nice coastal area, Agios Gorgios. And here again, we've got a coastal area with scrub. So of course, we're looking around again for anything that might pop up, like this Rupel's warbler or Isabelline wheatears. You really just don't know what might happen. A couple of years ago, there was a huge migration of painted ladies. It was like walking through a river of painted ladies. And we turn over a few stones and find these wonderful beasts like this centipede, or also this tiny and amazingly elegant look. And then it's back to the hotel in order to get ourselves fortified for doing the list, and some need more fortification than others. And then it's off again the next morning, and we're going up into a gorge to begin with, where we're looking for really exciting birds. We're looking for these birds. I hope it's up on your screen, the long-legged buzzard. And we quite often see them displaying. And the excitement in the group is palpable, although some even have to lie down to recover themselves after the excitement of the long-legged buzzard, and who knows what else we might find around there. We carry on upwards to about 1,000 meters. We go to Stavros, and here there's a really nice little place to have a picnic, and there's also a cafe. It's an excellent place. The cafe sells coffee, as you'd imagine, classic Turkish Cypriot sort of coffee. It helps having a moustache, really, so you can filter out some of the grains, but it is very stimulating indeed, and it's a lovely place to be with various small birds like coal tits and others around and about calling. And of course, the coal tits up there are special. We go a little bit higher up to look at this endemic native cedar with its wonderful, beautiful spreading branches. We hunt for these birds, which are subspecies, so worth seeing. They're not full species yet, but who knows? We let the taxonomists get on with it, and we keep the jay and we keep the coal tit in our rear pocket, so that when they do become full species, we can smile knowingly. And then our last day on the Go Slow, or penultimate day before we go to the airport, we have a wonderful walk along the cliffs at Aphrodite Cliffs, and then we head to Smies, which, in order to annoy Yanis, I occasionally call it Smidges. So as we walk along that cliff top, the views are stupendous. There's normally warm, early spring sunshine. The plants are lovely. These turban buttercups, also scattered amongst the turban buttercups, are these gorgeous cyclamen. They really are just outstanding. There are butterflies around, of course, and Paphos blue we find just about every time we visit there. And then we go to Smies and we walk along what I call the Orchid Mile. And it's not really, it's about 1 kilometer, and Doros and the faithful bus follow us downhill. We drive up to the top. It's not a steep walk at all, around about 1 kilometer, and we walk down it, and there are orchids galore. And the way that the whole area is set up, these orchids are basically at about eye level, so they're fantastic to see and to photograph. Ophrys israelitica, there's Ophrys elegans, there's Dactylorhiza romana. It's just absolutely amazing. There's just about everything. There's about 21, 22 species of orchids. It is a fantastic place to go to. I think I've pretty much run out of time, gone over time, but just to tell you about what would happen were you to come on the Isle of Cyprus trip rather than the Go Slow, that's what I was just talking about. There are an extra couple of stops that we do, or we jiggle the itinerary a little. So we have some time here in Larnaca. We fly to Larnaca. We do the Salt Lake, fantastic for all sorts of waders, and the marsh sandpipers that other people have mentioned and that they love, which are wonderful birds. And we also go up, if we can, up into the Troodos Mountains, and there we can also pick up those subspecies birds and tree creeper. We have had Dorothy's tree creeper, a lovely name for that subspecies, and we can frolic in the snow while we're up there as well. But I've overstretched my time, so I will stop there. Thank you.